Last story today I want to turn to very quickly, and I called this Justice Delayed, Michael Flynn versus Emmett Sullivan. And the quick legal point to make is, if you don't remember where this is, and probably many of you do, but very quickly, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn I hope he's changed by now, was a Democrat, and he served under President Obama. And he then was going to serve when President Trump won. Michael Flynn, was going to move over to the White House and serve President Trump as National Security Advisor. But Michael Flynn had angered the leftist Obama administration. He had publicly disagreed with them about the Iran deal, which everyone informed, many military leaders called out the Iran deal during the time of the negotiation. Every time information came out saying, this is a really, really bad deal. We're not getting a good deal here. This is bad. But this was someone that President Obama took real offense at. So Flynn comes in, and long story short, we've been over it many times, but as the operation, as the overthrow of the government effort, as the coup against President Trump, which really began as an operation against him during the election cycle, and continued inside the FBI, inside the Department of Justice, the effort to destroy this man, first candidate Trump, and then President Trump. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was one of the people that they chose as a target. And Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, early on in the Trump administration, had an interaction with the FBI where they were asking him questions about a conversation he had had with a Russian ambassador. And what the conversation with, and all it involved very quickly, was they're asking him questions about his conversation with the Russian ambassador. The FBI people go back to the FBI and report, essentially, we think he was telling the truth. He didn't do anything wrong. Seemed fine to us. They're ready to drop it because all of the suspicions that had actually been cooked up inside the FBI and the DOJ, this concoction of the Trump-Russia collusion, which never occurred, but we all on this show call it the Russia collusion hoax, had never occurred, but they were working very hard to make something out of nothing as a means to continue going after President Trump. One person they thought they could potentially use to try to turn against President Trump, get information on him, was Flynn. Didn't work out. Anyway, long story short, they ended up accusing Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, accusing him, and then later indicting him under the Mueller investigation, indicting him for this is what I've used the expression, process crimes, the kind of perjury trap set up, the argument that they had been listening. He didn't even know, Flynn didn't know when he's being questioned, that his conversation with Kislyak had been recorded. And so he's just answering, and the people questioning him, have the transcript in front of them or have it to refer to later. Point of the whole thing was they set him up, perjury trap, indict him, and off they go to the races. This is someone they hope Flynn will be ultimately flip and turn on Trump. So Flynn has been through the ringer almost beyond description. He has been indicted, he's been prosecuted, and he ended up, because of the way the FBI treated his family, threats against his son, he's lost everything, lost his home, couldn't keep up his mortgage. Lost everything defending himself, and now they're threatening his son. So, and this is a tactics that these are not new to this current FBI and Department of Justice. These are tactics used in third world dictatorships. They're tactics used by communist, Marxist, evil governments that simply go to attack the predecessor in the administration or attack their political enemies. These are evil tactics. It wasn't the first time, but they don't belong in America. That's what they did to him. He pleads guilty, and he's about to be sentenced. And fortunately for all of us, he retained the attorney who's been on this show many times, a friend of mine, Sidney Powell. They retained Sidney Powell. Flynn retained Sidney Powell. New filings are made. And the long and short of it was Sidney Powell. And by the time the sentencing is coming close, most of America who's paying attention has become aware that actually Flynn was set up, and not only was he set up, but the entire Russia collusion story was a farce, was made up by people inside the DOJ and the FBI with the effort to bring down candidate Trump and then President Trump. Astonishing level of treachery engaged in by numerous people inside those agencies, our national law enforcement agencies, treachery designed to set up people to do the perjury trap thing to get to the point they end up just saying, okay, what do I have to do? They will do anything to cooperate because they've been set up by this just it is the most despicable, un-American conduct by these people. So Flynn retains Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell begins, because we've all started to know these things now, and Sidney Powell, former prosecutor, very, very aware with the Department of Justice, very aware of what procedures are supposed to follow, what should have been done, what wasn't done. She begins filing motions, and she's a very, very tough attorney, very smart, very committed to the actual rule of law. She's filing motions and she's demanding discovery. She's trying to get at, what happened inside and expose what happened inside the FBI and the DOJ. And her motions are bringing things forward. New arguments are being made. The case is being heard in the federal district court in Washington, D.C. under Judge Emmett Sullivan. So Emmett Sullivan, as a small aside, already knows Sidney Powell fairly well because Sidney Powell, was in front of him numerous times when she was in the DOJ and when she was involved in the prosecutions of Enron officials. And she wrote the book, Sidney Powell wrote her book, License to Lie, talking about the unbelievable corruption, but the corruption and the nefarious conduct of lawyers inside the FBI and the DOJ when they decide to go after someone, the way they set up people, they ended up making crimes, prosecuting for people for conduct that doesn't even constitute a crime. Her book is brilliant. So she's in front of Sullivan. Sullivan more or less went along with the rule of law in that case. So Sidney Powell filing his motions, thinking we're going to get justice. And as she begins exposing more and more of what really happens inside the FBI and DOJ, the Department of Justice announces they're withdrawing all charges against Flynn. They announce dropping all charges, and the prosecutors, the Department of Justice is the prosecutor, they move to dismiss all charges against Flynn. Now, let me make clear what happens. I'm a lawyer by background. I can tell you this is the way it is. You have, for very important reasons in our Constitution, separation of powers. You have an executive branch, and that includes the president, the law enforcement agencies, the Department of Justice. You have the judicial branch. They are not there to prosecute laws. The executive branch does the prosecution. The judicial branch is the one that hears cases. They apply the law. They don't make the law. Emmett Sullivan's job when the DOJ moved to dismiss was to say, case dismissed. Okay, the prosecutor, the only entity in this entire litigation that has the right to bring charges, that did bring charges against Flynn, has now said we're dropping charges, and therefore the only answer there was for him legally, for Emmett Sullivan, was to drop all the charges, and he won't do it. Emmett Sullivan, Democrat appointed judge, federal district court judge, is so determined to keep Michael Flynn under the thumb of the DOJ, under the thumb of the media, under the thumb of the prosecutors, that even though the prosecutors have said, based on everything they discovered and things that came out, and once, by the way, these things came out in response to Sidney Powell's motions and in response to Attorney General Barr appointing a special attorney, U.S. attorney, just to look into all the documents that the DOJ held on to and didn't turn over when they were supposed to. So, in these kind of cases, in criminal cases, there is an absolute standard. The Brady rule says if you're the prosecutor and you're going after somebody and the lawyer for the person you're accusing says, I want to see this document, or even if they don't ask, the prosecutor has a duty under law, under the Brady rule, to turn over all information to the person being accused, to their lawyer, to the defendant, that is possibly exculpatory, could help, meaning proving their innocence, or proving that they weren't guilty of all charges, or in any way impacting the possible sentencing of that person. There is a very high absolute duty, Brady rule, you gotta turn it over. And what Sidney Powell was fully aware of, and why she went after the DOJ in continued motions demanding that things be turned over. Finally, Attorney General Barr gets a U.S. attorney involved to look at all the documents the DOJ withheld, and that attorney says, whoa, you could not DOJ attorneys, you cannot withhold this information, these documents from Flynn, from the accused. So the documents get turned over, and we went over them in great detail at the time, but the gist of them was made very clear that the entire effort to prosecute and get Michael Flynn was concocted and was unjustified by the law, was essentially part of the witch hunt. The documents made clear by the notes made by the people involved in the decisions with respect to Michael Flynn being prosecuted make very clear they were just setting him up. They're finding some way to get him, and they found a way. And the notes make clear they're cooking the books. They're cooking up the terms of this prosecution, cooking up the charges. They're setting him up. They know that he didn't do anything wrong. They know he didn't, but they want to get him because they ultimately want to get him to maybe turn on President Trump. Once these documents become clear, then the DOJ says, okay, uncle. They file the motion, drop all charges, and Emmett Sullivan has no other choice under law, no other choice than to dismiss these charges. That he doesn't have the role of prosecutor to be saying, well, maybe prosecutors, you should have charged this crime, and maybe we can find some other crime. Maybe can we go investigate further, find some other crime? The judge, Emmett Sullivan, has a job to dismiss the case because the only party with the role to accuse anybody, including Michael Flynn, is the prosecutor. And Sullivan won't dismiss the charges. Sullivan wants to hold a hearing. He wants to continue discussing whether or not, why did Michael Flynn plead guilty if he really wasn't guilty, which everyone who's ever studied criminal law understands exactly why people sometimes plead guilty when they're not guilty, because they can't stand the pressure any longer coming from corrupt practices by prosecutors. That is a reason many people do that. So, back to the situation that Sullivan will just simply not dismiss charges. So Sidney Powell leaps into action, files a writ of mandamus, which is just it's a legal document going from the district court where the case is being heard. She files a writ of mandamus in the appellate court, the next court up. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals says, come on, you've got to dismiss this. Emmett Sullivan has no right to not do it. And let me make clear something, people. What Emmett Sullivan is doing is pretty much unprecedented. This is not like a routine thing once the prosecutors drop all charges for the judge to try to hold on to the case, dig into the background of the defendant, find something else he might be able to accuse him of. This is unheard of. So Sidney files a writ of mandamus. She gets a three-judge panel at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they actually follow the law and say, yeah, actually, Judge Sullivan, you got to dismiss these charges. I mean, you've got nowhere to go. You have no right to do this. And instead of accepting that, Emmett Sullivan, who's, by the way, hired his own attorney, the federal district court judge hired his own attorney to defend him in his effort to continue to try to persecute Flynn. So then that attorney for the judge appeals the full circuit court, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they just ruled, actually, it was a procedural ruling, but they ruled that the writ of mandamus was premature. Essentially, they're saying, let Sullivan get to the point of holding the hearing at which time he's supposed to dismiss these charges, and then if he refuses to dismiss them, then you can come back with your writ of mandamus. And you might say in some kind of perfect utopian, sterile, legal construct world, well, that's not so bad because, they're just trying to say, let's just follow the process. It is evil and it is bad because the point of this ruling is to drag out this case as long as they can, drag it out as long as they can, keep Michael Flynn under their thumb, keep him under their reps. And so now the case is back before Sullivan, who's going to decide what he's going to do with it. And I'll tell you, this example I was mentioning earlier, this is like when you're in the World Series and you're in the bottom of the ninth and you're the batter and you have three men on base and you hit a grand slam home run and it goes out of the park and every single runner runs around the bases and everyone touches all the bases they had to touch at the end and you win. But at the end of the game, the umpire says, you know what? I'm not sure we're going to give you all those runs. I mean, that's 4 runs. I don't think so. We're going to talk about it and we're going to, think it through. And you, the batter, you, the teams, you can't do that. You can't. The rules are the rules. I hit a grand slam and we got 4 runs and we all touched the bases and we all came home. Rules are the rules. And the umpire saying, well, we're going to talk about some more. And then you appeal it to the umpire association and they say, well, let the umpires talk about it a little bit more. It's that level of absurdity. There's no basis for what Sullivan is doing. And it is a very much an indication, very much a window on the reality that there is a giant cabal in this country still determined to bring down President Trump. And the most troubling of all, and I'll close out with this and turn to the end of my show today, most troubling of all, it is a signal about how very dangerous America is becoming because left-wingers in this country do not believe they have to follow the rule of law. They do not think it applies to them. They did not when they were inside the DOJ and the FBI going after innocent people, cooking up charges, concocting charges, making things up, lying on forms. They thought this was the right thing to do because they don't like Trump and they know better than the voters. But when you have people in the national law enforcement agencies taking that position, what they're really saying is rule of law doesn't matter, what we think matters. This is what Sullivan is saying. Rule of law doesn't matter. What I think matters. I don't think the DOJ should drop these charges, so I'm going to drag this out as long as I can. And people, if we lose the rule of law in this country, we are truly, truly down a very dangerous path.